How do you write Cantonese? Can you even write Cantonese? Is it the same as Simplified Chinese or Traditional Chinese? Or is it a totally different language? These questions come up all the time. My cousin, who is a native Mandarin speaker from Shanghai, literally asked me this earlier. So yes, even Chinese people get confused. And as a professional translator, I've had agencies and clients ask me this too. So today, I'm going to clear up all the confusion once and for all. I'll break everything down in an easy to understand way and illustrate everything with examples, including Cantopop. Hello there, my name is Kayi. I'm a chartered Chinese to English translator and qualified Mandarin teacher. I was born in Shanghai, grew up in Hong Kong, and I use both Cantonese and Mandarin every day in my personal and professional life. So if you've ever scratched your head wondering how Cantonese fits into the whole Chinese language puzzle, and specifically if you've been wondering if Cantonese can be written and how it is written, this is the video for you. This video is divided into 3 parts. In part 1, I'll quickly explain what Cantonese is and how it relates to Mandarin and Chinese. In part 2, I'll explain how written Cantonese relates to Simplified Chinese and Traditional Chinese. And in part 3, I'll explain what Hou Yu and Su Min Yu are. These are the 2 main forms of written Cantonese. In part 3.1, I'll illustrate the differences between Hou Yu, Su Min Yu, Simplified and Traditional Chinese using a simple sentence as an example. And in part 3.2, I'll illustrate the difference between these 2 written forms using examples from Cantopop songs. And lastly, in 3.3, I'll further illustrate the differences using an actual book created by me and my sister. By the end of this video, you'll understand how written Cantonese actually works, and you will no longer be confused. Let's dive in. So part 1, quick summary. What is Cantonese? First, let's define what Cantonese is, because many people are confused about the differences between Cantonese, Mandarin, and Chinese. I've made an entire video explaining all this in much greater detail, linked down below, but here's a quick summary. Chinese is actually a large language family, also known as the Sinitic language family, which includes many branches. One of these branches is the Yue branch, which includes Cantonese. Mandarin is another branch within the Chinese language family. So in short, while Cantonese and Mandarin are both part of the same language family, they sound very different and linguistically are classified as different languages. When people talk about writing Chinese, they are usually referred to written Mandarin, which uses a formal, standardized form of grammar and vocabulary. This is taught in schools across mainland China, Taiwan, and beyond. But what about Cantonese? How do you write that? Can you write Cantonese? And is written Cantonese the same as Simplified Chinese or Traditional Chinese? Don't worry, I'll break this all down in part 2. Part 2. Is written Cantonese the same as Traditional or Simplified Chinese? Let's clear this up first. I've actually made an entire video explaining what Traditional and Simplified Chinese are, so be sure to check it out. Link down below. In very simple terms, Traditional Chinese and Simplified Chinese are 2 scripts or writing systems for writing the Chinese language. To massively oversimplify it, think of them as different alphabets. Although, of course, the Chinese writing system is not alphabet-based. So, Traditional Chinese has been in use for thousands of years, while Simplified Chinese has much more recent origins. It was introduced in the 1950s by the Chinese government in mainland China as a way to improve literacy. To give you an idea of how these 2 scripts are different, let's take a look at the character for dragon. As you can see, the Chinese version has 16 strokes, while the simplified version has only 5 strokes. So how does Cantonese fit into this puzzle? Cantonese can be written using traditional or simplified Chinese characters. In Hong Kong and Macau, people use traditional Chinese. In mainland China, they use simplified Chinese. Overseas Cantonese speakers might use either depending on their background. Remember, you cannot speak traditional or simplified Chinese. These are writing systems. You can speak Cantonese, Mandarin, or any of the other Chinese language variants / dialect, and any of them can, in theory, be written using traditional or simplified Chinese characters. But the script is only part of the puzzle. The next question is, what kind of grammar and vocabulary are you using when you write Cantonese? And that's where things get interesting and, let's face it, pretty complicated and confusing even for Chinese people. But don't worry, I'll break everything down in very simple terms in part 3 using tons of real life examples. So part 3, 2 forms of written Cantonese, 书面語 versus 口語. So what you need to understand about written Cantonese is this. There are actually 2 forms of written Cantonese, and this is the key concept most people, even Chinese people, don't know about. Let's break it down. First, let's talk about 书面語, formal written Cantonese. This is the official standard way of writing Cantonese. But actually, it's basically written Mandarin Chinese. The vocabulary, the grammar, the sentence structure is all aligned with Mandarin Chinese. Even though it's read out in Cantonese, it doesn't reflect how people actually speak in daily life. So think textbooks, government documents, newspapers, and even Cantopop song lyrics. Most of these use 书面語. It is formal, standardized, and generally speaking, is readable by all Chinese speakers as long as they can read the script. Because remember, not everyone in mainland China can read traditional Chinese. Now contrast that with 口語, colloquial written Cantonese. This is the fun one. It's written exactly how people speak Cantonese. This form of written Cantonese reflects the grammar, slang, and local expressions used by Cantonese speakers in real life. But here's the thing to remember. 口語 in its written form is used almost exclusively in informal settings. Think WhatsApp messages, memes, internet forums, casual comic books. You rarely see it in serious newspapers or academic writing. It's considered more lowbrow, kind of like writing in street lingo in English. That said, some Hong Kong tabloid papers do use 口語 in their headlines to feel more down to earth or grab attention. Think of it like using all caps slang in The Sun or Daily Mirror. For those of you who live in the UK, you know what I mean. Let me share with you a real life example. I've done a little Google search and found this headline on the homepage of a Hong Kong tabloid newspaper. The first part says, 收樓冇應門. So this headline contains the 口語 Cantonese character 冇, which means 沒有, or 沒有in Mandarin, which means not. This style of writing gives the headline a local tabloid feel. If you wrote that in a school essay, you would get a big, fat cross. Okay, so that's the theory behind 口語 and 書面語, but I know it can all sound very complicated and abstract. So in part 3.1, I'll illustrate these differences with a simple example so you know exactly how these 2 writing systems work in real life. Part 3.1, the real life example, I am going to school tomorrow. Let me show you the differences with a super simple sentence. I am going to school tomorrow. Let's translate this into the formal form of written Cantonese, 書面語 first. As you can see in the table, you can write it in traditional or simplified Chinese. In both cases, the pronunciation in Cantonese is the same. 我明天要去上學. 我明天要去上學. This is 書面語. The thing to remember is that this sounds natural in Mandarin but not in spoken Cantonese. This sentence can be read out word for word in Mandarin, pronounced like this, 我明天要去上學. The sentence I just said is exactly how a Mandarin speaker would say, I am going to school tomorrow. So, yep, it's pretty weird. 書面語 is basically based on the grammatical rules and vocabulary of Mandarin Chinese. So now let's switch gears and take a look at how the same sentence can be written in the informal form of written Cantonese 口語. You can see it written in a table in both traditional and simplified Chinese. In Cantonese, you would read this sentence out as this. 我聽日要返學. 我聽日要返學. This is exactly how a Cantonese speaker would say it in real life. This sentence, in its written form, may not be immediately comprehensible to a non-Cantonese speaker. Specifically, 聽日 is the Cantonese word for tomorrow, and 返學, the Cantonese word for go to school. The Mandarin equivalents would be 明天 and 上學, completely different both read out loud and written down. So basically, 書面語我明天要去上學 sounds natural in Mandarin 我明天要去上學 but doesn't sound natural in spoken Cantonese. Whereas 口語我聽日要返學 is exactly how a Cantonese speaker would say it in daily life, but you would not find it in a book. Okay, so in summary, 書面語 is formal and standardized. You find this in a textbook or newspaper. 口語 is what a real Cantonese speaker would type in a text message or say in conversations. Also, while most 口語 is written in traditional Chinese because it's mostly used by Hong Kong people, you can find 口語 written in simplified Chinese, especially among speakers from Guangzhou or parts of mainland China. I've seen my own friends from Guangzhou do this in group chats. Now, if you are interested in Cantonese, there's a good chance that you are interested in Cantopop. So, do Cantopop songs use 書面語 or 口語? Let's find out in part 3.2. So, part 3.2, examples from Cantopop. First of all, let's take a look at the legendary opening lines of 海闊天空, a song by Beyond. Roughly translated into English, it says, Today I saw the snow drifting in the cold night. With a cold heart, I also drift away to a distant place. This is classic 書面語. It's read aloud, or rather sung aloud in Cantonese, but the grammar and vocabulary reflect standard Chinese. Due to the literary tradition associated with 書面語, this form of written Cantonese has a more elevated, literary, even poetic feel. In fact, the vast majority of Cantopop songs are written and sung in 書面語, which is why singing Cantopop songs alone will not help you master spoken Cantonese. Now contrast that with a lesser-known song called 你唔愛我啦 by a singer called 李彩華. The title of the song and one of the lines from the chorus reads 你唔愛我啦. This line is pure 口語, exactly how you would say it in spoken Cantonese. It means you don't love me anymore. Imagine converting this to 書面語. 你不愛我了. It sounds more formal and elevated, but does not reflect how people speak Cantonese in real life. Cantonese songs written in 口語 sound more raw, more real, but they are much rarer because they break with tradition and can feel less poetic. Okay, so we've covered pop culture. What about textbooks? How do Hong Kong children navigate written Cantonese? In the next part, I'll explain this using a book my sister and I created. So part 3.3, the real life example from our book. So this book is called My Everyday Life, the traditional Chinese/Cantonese version. It's part of a series of bilingual picture books my sister and I have created, link down below if you want to find out more. When creating this book, I had to decide whether to use 書面語 or 口語. And ultimately, I landed on using 書面語 for the written text, but 口語 for the audio pronunciation guides. This is because if you were to buy a similar book aimed at children in a bookshop in Hong Kong, that's exactly what you would find. So I wanted my book to reflect that. I'll give you an example. On page 2, for the sentence, how many purple flowers can you find? The corresponding traditional Chinese reads, 你能找到幾朵紫色的花? This is how a Chinese textbook written for Cantonese-speaking children in Hong Kong would represent this sentence. However, when it was time for me to record the audio track for this sentence, I decided to read it out loud using 口語. Guys, I wanted to show you how this works. So here's the QR code for the audio track. Let me scan it with my phone. Yep, we'll go for the Chinese track. 你能夠揾到幾朵紫色嘅花? So as you can see, 你能夠揾到幾朵紫色嘅花? That's the 口語 equivalent of 你能找到幾朵紫色的花. Because 你能找到幾多知識的話 simply isn't how anyone would speak in real life in Cantonese. So in my opinion, it wouldn't be appropriate for an audio recording. So yes, essentially, a Cantonese-speaking child growing up in Hong Kong has to navigate the reality of reading and writing Chinese in a way that's different from how they speak. It's a bit like medieval European scholars having to master their own vernacular language and Latin. Okay, now, so let's recap. Cantonese can be written using traditional or simplified Chinese characters. There are two forms of written Cantonese, 書面語, the formal standard form aligned with Mandarin, and 口語, the informal colloquial version that reflects how Cantonese is actually spoken. 書面語, when written, is widely understood across the Chinese-speaking world, whereas 口語 is only comprehensible to fluent Cantonese speakers. You will see 書面語 in books, songs, and newspapers. 口語 is mostly used for chats, forums, and casual media. And that's why this topic causes so much confusion. But hopefully it all makes a lot more sense now. If you found this video helpful and want to understand more about how Cantonese fits into the wider Chinese language landscape, check out my video, Cantonese versus Mandarin, what's the difference? I break down all the key distinctions in just a few minutes. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!